Napoleon then informed me of the precautions which he made his army take when before Mantua in order to preserve their health in that sickly country, one of which was burning large fires all night and obliging the troops to keep by them. He spoke about the measures which he had caused to be taken at Jaffa. After the assault, said he, it was impossible to restore any kind of discipline until night. The infuriated soldiers rushed into the streets in search of women. You know what kind of people the Turks are. A few of them kept up a fire in the streets. The soldiers, who desired nothing more, whenever a shot was discharged, cried out that they were fired upon from certain houses, which they immediately broke open and violated all the women they found. This, together with their having plundered pelisses and other articles of Turkish dress, many of which were infected, produced the plague among them. The following day I gave orders that every soldier should bring his plunder into the square, where all articles of apparel were burnt, but the disease had already been disseminated. I caused the sick to be immediately sent to the hospitals, where those infected with the plague were separated from the rest. For a short time I succeeded in persuading the troops that it was only a fever with buboes and not the plague, and in order to convince them of it, I went publicly to the bedside of a soldier who was infected and handled him. This had a great effect in encouraging them, and even some of the surgeons who had abandoned them became ashamed and returned to their duties. In consequence of the advice of the medical officers, I ordered that all the buboes which did not appear likely to suppurate should be open. Previous to giving this order, I had the experiment made upon a certain number and allowed an equal number of others to be treated in the usual manner, by which it was found that a much greater proportion of the former recovered. 17th, saw Sir Hudson Lowe in town, who was in a very surly humor, and with whom I had a long conversation, part of it not of a very agreeable nature. He said that it did not appear that I had made use of arguments of a nature sufficiently forcible to undeceive General Bonaparte, and that he would write to Lord Bathurst that all the time General Bonaparte was so much in the dark respecting his character, no Englishman excepting Admiral Malcolm and myself had access to him. I informed His Excellency that Sir Pulteney Malcolm had done everything in his power to conciliate and to reconcile matters, and had endeavored by all means to justify his, Sir Hudson's, conduct. So much so, indeed, that Napoleon had expressed his discontent at it. As to myself, I had often exerted myself to the utmost of my ability to effect the same. I also suggested to His Excellency that if Captain Lamb were to make an affidavit of the falsity of the charges relative to the supposed proposal to break the bust, it would effectually silence all calumniators. Sir Hudson Lowe replied, "I judge from effect, sir. You do not appear to have testified sufficient indignation at what General Bonaparte said and did. You ought to have told him that he was guilty of a dirty action." His Excellency then said that Napoleon had caused Bertrand to write him the most impertinent letter which he had ever received, in reply to one written by him relative to the chessmen, and another equally so for the purpose of being given to the gunner of the bearing, that he was authorized to turn General Bertrand off the island for his impertinence. He then desired me to express to General Bonaparte that he had sent for me in order to inquire who was the author of a report so false as that the gunner who had brought out the bust had been prevented from going on shore and disposing of his goods, and had in consequence sustained losses and suffered bad treatment. Also, that he was greatly astonished at the tenor of the last letter he had received, more so indeed than at that of any that had been sent to him since he arrived on the island. 18th saw Napoleon, to whom I communicated the message I had been ordered to deliver by Sir Hudson Lowe. He replied that the gunner had declared before Madame Bertrand that he had been prevented from going on shore for several days and consequently had been obliged to sell his little venture to Solomon or some other shopkeeper for half price, and had thereby sustained a great loss. I have been informed, and I believe it, continued the emperor, that this bad treatment was caused by his having brought out the bust of my son. The governor has expressed astonishment at the tenor of the letters sent to him. I want nothing from his caprice. He says that, according to the Règlement établi en vigueur, he was not authorized to send up those presents. Where are those regulations? I have never seen them. If they are new restrictions, let them be made known. But I never have heard that, because there was a crown upon toys. They were to be prohibited. I protest against all restrictions which are not made known to me previous to their being put into execution by Lord Bathurst's speech. He has no right to make any new restriction. Could he not have said that he protested against the crown, and we should have laughed at it? But no, he must give a coup d'épingle, refer to unknown restrictions, and throw in insinuations, and it is to his goodness I am indebted for them, to a dungeon, to chains upon his legs and arms. L'uomo s'accostuma ma al capriccio d'altrui è impossibile. A man may accustom himself, but to another's caprice it is impossible. I do not desire any favor from him. Perhaps he requires that I should write him a letter of thanks daily for the air which I breathe. Un uomo che m'amasa ogni giorno. And then desires that I should thank him for it. He reminds me of a German Barreau who, while best in a doing, with all his might and unfortunate sufferer, cried after each blow, Pardon, monsieur, pour la grande liberté que je prends. Pardon, sir, for the great liberty which I take. I asked what answer I should return. Tell him, said Napoleon, che io non son obbligato di render nessun conto al mio baja. After walking about for a moment, he said with energy, Vous me faites des insinuations. C'est toi la manière d'agir de tous les tyrans d'Italie. Cet homme parois n'a pas d'autre but que de me tuer à coups d'épingle, soit au moral, soit au physique ou au bureau, mais tuera d'un seul coup. Sa conduite est tortueuse et environnée de mystère. La crime seule marche dans les ténèbres. Un juge, son prince, et sa nation seront instruits, et sa méchante conduite sera connue, et s'il échappe à la justice de la loi qui viole, il n'échappera pas à la justice de l'opinion de tous les hommes éclairés et sensibles. Il est un mandataire infidèle. Il trompe son gouvernement contre montrant les vains mensonges et les calomnies qui sont dans les discours de Lord Balinck. Sa conduite pour le bus de mon fils, qui est prouvé, est horrible et digne de tout ce qu'il a fait depuis un an. This answer he desired me to deliver, which he observed would convince him of the real opinion he entertained of his character. After this, he said that he had informed Lord Amherst of the conduct pursued towards him. The ambassador said he declared that such were not the intentions of the bill, that the object of it was not to render worse, but to ameliorate my situation as a prisoner, and that he would not fail to make known the representations I had made to him, to the Prince Regent, to Lord Liverpool, and to Lord Bathurst. He asked permission to report that what I said to the governor. I replied, certainly. I told him that I had observed the governor taking him round the new road he had made, but that I supposed he had not communicated to him that I could neither quit it nor go into any house, and that a prohibition had formerly existed which debarred me from speaking to such persons as I might meet. As this, He was beaucoup frappé, greatly struck. He proposed that I should see the governor. I replied, "Neither your prince nor both of your houses of parliament can oblige me to see mon geôlier et mon bureau. Ce n'est pas l'habit qui fait le geôlier, c'est la manière et la mœurs." I told him that he had pushed matters to such an extremity that in order to leave nothing in his power, I had confined myself to my room, expecting that he would surround the house with sentinels. I left nothing for him to effect except violating my privacy, which he could not have done without walking over my corpse, that I would not commit suicide, but would exult in being assassinated by an Englishman instead of drawing back reculé, and would be a consolation to me in my last moments. The emperor concluded by telling me that he had no objection, that the governor should be acquainted with every sentiment which he had expressed to me. 18th. Went to town in pursuance to Sir Hudson Lowe's directions, to whom I repeated the message which I had been ordered to deliver. His Excellency commenced his reply by denying that he had ordered me to say that he, the governor, was surprised at the tenor of the 2 last notes he had received, and that he had called out to me on leaving the room to repeat the former only. He then said, darting a furious look at me, "General Bonaparte's expressions convince me, sir, more and more, that no means have been taken to justify my character to him. Tell him," continued he, in not the most moderate tone of voice, to show I am not afraid to send anything home. I shall send what he has stated to ministers. He then demanded me to communicate anything else I was charged with. When I came to that part in which Napoleon, describing what he had related to Lord Amherst, had said, "But I suppose he did not tell you that I was not permitted to leave the road?" His Excellency, whose appearance I shall not attempt to describe, started up, and with a degree of violence which considerably impeded his utterance, exclaimed, "'Tis false! 'Tis false! I did tell him!" When he had recovered a little of his powers of speech, he reproached me in a violent manner with not having contradicted the assertion, also with having manifested little warmth in his defense. After he had expended some portion of his wrath, I observed that I had attempted his defense to the best of my abilities, but that I did not think he ought to be much surprised at Napoleon's not being on good terms with him. And he considered what material alterations had taken place in his situation since his arrival, all of which tended to render it more unpleasant. A long discussion now followed, during which I recounted to His Excellency some of his own restrictions, amongst others, that one in which he prohibited Napoleon from speaking, at which he again became very angry and insisted that it was not a prohibition. It was only a request. That it was not his fault if General Bonaparte did not choose to write out. I took the liberty then of asking the following question. Place yourself, sir, in Napoleon's situation. Would you have availed yourself of the permission to write out coupled with the restriction imposed upon him? His Excellency refused to reply to his question, which he pronounced to be an insult to him as governor and representative of His Majesty. He then desired me to give my opinion respecting Lord Bathurst's speech. I pointed out that many of his lordship's positions were at variance with the truth. After hearing my opinion, His Excellency expressed much anger in my presuming to speak so freely on a speech made by one of His Majesty's Secretaries of State that I appeared to be an advocate for the French, and that nobody else in the island held similar opinions or would dare to express them. He concluded by telling me that I was not permitted for the future to hold any conversation with General Bonaparte unless upon professional subjects, and ordering me to come to town every Monday and Thursday in order to report to him General Bonaparte's health and his habits.